This is what in the world? That is coming, huh? I think that's his cap, man. He got his cap.
Real quiet stuff.
Buffalo Bill Cody's legacy of advocacy and reconciliation is perhaps best ever before. Should we remember not just for being a champion throughout the American West,
There's some movie playing if you want to watch it there.
communities as they were equally pressured into a foreign way of life.
There's a movie playing if you want to watch it there, okay?
Get a count of the video or no?
Yeah, you can do that. Yeah. But if you want to watch the video there too, feel free.
Those who performed with the Wild West show will live on.
If you've ever gone to a Western movie, if you've ever attended a rodeo, if you have ever done a hike through the mountains, to enjoy the animals, to look at the wildlife and things like this, these are all the kinds of values that Buffalo Bill was promoting at a time when everybody else was promoting modern and building and construction and industrializing. But now here's Buffalo Bill, keeping our West alive.
Museums have kind of a sacred obligation to say, don't oversimplify this person. Whatever you do, don't make him what he never was in life. Don't make him a simple, predictable character. He was not that.
Buffalo Bill was my inspiration and my hero. His generosity and his feeling of togetherness and love just was part of him.
Like Voltaire said, history is a prickly family again. Yet one generation's heroes are often shot out of the saddle by the next generation, and then the next generation coming after this says, oh no, let's rethink it. Buffalo Bill's life is significant, and maybe put him back in the saddle again.
I think it'll replay so you can watch it again from the beginning, okay?
The name Buffalo Bill conjures up, for many, the romance of the American West, childhood memories of Western movies and dime novels, and a sense of cultural identity that frames both the legend and the reality of the American West as we know it today. For others, Buffalo Bill represents the tragedy of American conquest and the loss of bison, indigenous lands, and autonomy. But who exactly was this man, this legend of the West, and what was his role in American history?
I think with Buffalo Bill, when we ask what role did he play, we just necessarily have to say better make that plural. What roles did he play? Because he is just a great training ground for the mind, for anybody who's tempted to simplify the people of the past.
Buffalo Bill was not just a creature of fiction. He received the Congressional Medal of Honor. He was very much a part of the Indian Wars and all of the things that he later on portrayed in his Wild West show.
Buffalo Bill is an interesting character and a very complex story across time and space and lots of different concepts that are a little bit controversial and sometimes really cool and really fascinating. And all of those things come together in the Wild West story, Buffalo Bill's story.
The 1800s in North America were a complicated time of both expansion and settlement, of gain and loss, of fulfilling the dreams of some and crushing the hopes of others. Right in the middle of this turbulent time in American history was William F. Cody, later known as Buffalo Bill. Will Cody came of age in Kansas Territory during a period when pro- and anti-slavery factions split Kansas Territory. Even as far west as Kansas, the events leading up to the Civil War had tragic consequences for young Will Cody.
His father did not think slavery should be in Kansas, spoke out about it at a public meeting, at which point a pro-slavery man jumped up, sort of stepped onto the dais, if you will, where he was talking, and stabbed him several times.
Cody's father eventually died as a result of his wounds, but not before the pro-slavers made life difficult for the family.
The family itself would be raided by some of them. They would come in and take food. They stole Buffalo Bill's horse. It was pretty tough.
And so, at the age of 11, after having lost his father and only brother, Will Cody set out to support his mother and sisters and find his place in the world. By the age of 17, he had worked as a messenger for an early version of the Pony Express, carried messages for the Army, drove mule trains along the Oregon Trail, prospected for gold right here in Colorado, and worked as an Army scout.
He was hired as a scout because he had so much experience traveling throughout the Great Plains, but also because he did know the American Indians. The folks in the Army didn't really know much about working with the Indians, but he did. So that became very helpful.
Buffalo Bill earned his nickname as a hunter for the Kansas Pacific Railroad. Cody was hired to provide buffalo meat for the railroad workers as they constructed line through the prairie. He proved to be so skilled in hunting bison that he earned his nickname Buffalo Bill Cody.
I think there's been a little bit of a misunderstanding that Buffalo Bill is the one who was responsible for the decimation of the American bison. And that's really not true. At that period of time, there were 30 to 60 million bison on the landscape. There was a huge population of bison across the American West. So the amount that Buffalo Bill was hunting in order to feed the workers was really a sustainable point.
All kinds of factors converge to reduce the population of bison. By putting bison in such prominent places in the Wild West show, he brought the bison into so many minds as real creatures, as creatures that they saw that were pretty magic in various ways and just kind of beyond comprehension. So it's hard to think that the more conventional forms of bison preservation would have gotten anywhere near as far without Cody saying that you don't want to care about these creatures.
Buffalo Bill had gained local notoriety in the West as a skilled scout and buffalo hunter, but a meeting with a famous author launched Buffalo Bill into the spotlight.
9 novels were written about people like Kit Carson, Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett. They were looking for interesting frontier characters. Ned Buntline was a dime novel writer, and when he met Buffalo Bill and wrote a story about him, that catapulted Buffalo Bill into some national fame. And that is what really gave the sort of jump start to his career as a man in show business.
Buffalo Bill's growing fame came on the heels of the Indian Wars of the 1850s to 1890s, when European Americans were reeling from Custer's defeat at the Battle of the Little Bighorn, and the Cheyenne, Lakota, and Arapaho celebrated their rightful victory. It was also a time when the West of Cody's youth had changed forever.
We have this young man who realizes as he's watching the West disappear around him through development and railroads and other things, he's realizing that where he grew up is no longer existing. And that's when he started developing his Wild West show.
He wanted to very much show the peoples of the West. So from the beginning, he had cowgirls, cowboys, he had Mexican vaqueros, he had the Lakota and Pawnee and some of the other Indian groups as well. And as time went by, that diversity only increased.
Fact and fiction often blurred together with Buffalo Bill's Wild West. The show was designed to entertain middle and upper class, mostly white audiences, and much of it bore little resemblance to reality. The dime novel stories of Buffalo Bill grew so exaggerated that Buffalo Bill the Showman became a fictionalized version of William F. Cody the Man. Many of the Wild West figures were romanticized or vilified in the show in a way they never were in life. Cowboys were transformed from their humble and troublesome roots to fanciful heroes on horseback. American Indians were portrayed as marauding antagonists, when in reality they were people with their own distinct lands and cultures, defending their way of life from Euro-American settlement.
I'd like to greet you in a good way from my heart to you.
American Indian performers were one of the most important parts of the Wild West show and became the centerpiece of the program. Back home, American Indian tribes had faced decades of broken promises from the American government and suffered greatly from the decimation of the buffalo.
Historically, Buffalo Bill's efforts to preserve some of the Indian culture is important because at that point the U.S. government is sending the Indian children off to schools, teaching them not to use their language, their culture, their clothing, teaching them to become good white capitalistic Christians. So he's preserving what a lot of people are trying to exterminate.
There was assimilation that was happening. They were assimilating us into a construct from a free-willing people and living an inherent right that was given to us. And that was being taken away from us.
It was a time of tremendous racism in this country. A time when American Indians were on reservations, their hair was being cut, they weren't allowed to do their dances, they weren't even allowed to dress like they had traditionally dressed, but not with Buffalo Bill's Wild West.
The Wild West show provided an unexpected escape from the difficulties of reservation life and provided a way to participate in an American economy when they had few options remaining.
In the beginning of his relationship with the Lakota, but also the people, the other nations. Well, there was some confrontation or some disagreements, but eventually it became a working relationship where they had a relationship between not only the show, but started having a relationship with families and helping them get their stories out and helping people to understand about the native people, the indigenous people.
Many of the Lakota who performed for Buffalo Bill enjoyed the work. They came back year after